So, as we're talking about the project schedule today, really in developing the project schedule, and which is one of the most important aspects of your project that you'll be doing, you know, doing the schedule and how is it you're going about doing the schedule. But in order to do that, you need to understand the project management process groups. So, we would have spoken about already the knowledge areas within project management and the 10 knowledge areas that we have. Now, the knowledge areas are linked to the process groups within project management. And the process groups really are the actions, like it says, directed towards a particular result. At the end of it, this is what you want to achieve, right? So the processes in each process group, right? It includes the 5 process groups, which are initiating, planning, executing, monitoring and control, and the closing process group. Now, each one of these, the name of them, right? So the name of the process group would actually tell you what you do in it. So in the initiating process group, initiate means to start. It's really the starting of your project. So this is where, as it says, you define and authorize the project. And from the last time, you would have seen that it means the development of your project charter, right? The planning process group, as the name implies, is whereby you would be planning your project, right? So within the planning process group, you would make all your different management plans, your risk management plan, your procurement plan, your safety plan, right? You would plan on the work that you have to do. And the outputs to these would be your WBS, something called the WBS, which is called your work breakdown structure, your scope statement, the work that you're going to be doing, as well as the schedule and the cost estimation that you will have. Now, the third process group would be the executing process group. And this would follow the planning process group because after you'd have planned everything and you'd have all your management plans, you are now able to execute your project, meaning here that you perform the actions necessary to complete the work, right, that you would have planned. Okay? So, in so doing, right, all the different, the scope of works and your project schedule, it comes into play in the executing process group. Um, Throughout your entire project, right, you would be able to monitor and control your project. So the monitoring and controlling process group really spans the entire project life cycle. And why it spans the entire project life cycle is that you're not going to wait until um, you started the execution part of the project and then start to monitor. Suppose a part of the plan wasn't done properly, or part of the initiating process wasn't done properly, right? Then when you start to actually execute and you actually start to do the project, then mistakes might now occur, or because you didn't start that monitoring process. So the monitoring and controlling process starts from the beginning of your project and it goes throughout the entire project life cycle. The controlling part is that you really want to try and control the risks associated, or you try to mitigate all risks associated or all changes that may occur in your project. And finally, the fifth process group would be the closing process group, right? And this is the end of your project for the formal acceptance of the work and the creation of all the closing document, the handover documents that you might have. Um, and like it says here, the mapping of the process groups is really shows each knowledge area, right? And what the knowledge area would be involved in, right? And the different aspects of each knowledge area. So let me just pause this here because I want to show you a short video on the linkage between the process groups and the knowledge areas. Let me just thought it was in the um, slide itself, right? So that
We are
you
doing what
are
we
able to see. Right. So let me just share my screen back. Right. Okay, so let's just take a look at this share sound, this video.
all of the knowledge areas and process groups that you will see on your upcoming PMP or CAPM examinations. PMP stands for Project Management Professional, and it's a leading certification for project managers worldwide. So just before we dive into process groups and knowledge areas, all the good stuff, let's take a look at what a project is first. Move on and let's take a look at the project lifecycle. There are 5 process groups within a project: initiating, planning, executing, monitoring, controlling, and closing. What you can see is that these different process groups actually overlap each other throughout the project. When we're starting our project, we initiate it. That means we are starting it. We create our project charter, which formally recognizes the existence of this project in our organization. Once we know why we want to start this project, then we plan out all the work that we need to do in order to accomplish the objectives of this project. Once we finish our planning, we're ready to actually do the work that we're supposed to do in order to accomplish the project's objectives. Throughout this entire process, we're monitoring, controlling it to ensure that we are doing what we set out to do. And lastly, when the deliverables are completed, we close out the project. And what you can see is that the peak of the activities happen in the execution phases. Another thing that you should note is that at the start of your project stakeholders have a high degree of influence. And as the project progresses, their influence dies down because the requirements are solidified and you're starting to execute. Another thing to note is the green line on this graph right here. As the project progresses, the cost of change increases. So this means that it's very important to gather your stakeholders' feedback and requirements up front and work that into your project, because making changes later on in your project can be very costly. So what we just looked at is the 5 process groups and the corresponding amount of activity that happened in each of these 5 process groups. We also saw that these 5 process groups don't happen in silo, they actually overlap each other. Here's another representation of the 5 process groups. We start with initiation, which is where our processes are defined, and the main output of this process group is the project charter, which formally authorizes the existence of the project and gives the project manager the authority to apply the organization's resources on the project. And after we initiated the project, we move into planning, which is where we establish the scope of the project, define the activities and actions that we need to take in order to accomplish the objective of the project. Now, once we have our project management plan, which has our budget, when we're going to do the task, how much we budget, the cost, etc., then we move into execution, which is where we hire people and we apply the organization's resources to actually implement the plan that we have planned in the planning stages. And then during this process, we're also monitoring, controlling it as well. So we're tracking, reviewing, and regulating what's actually happening in the execution phases and comparing it to what we planned out to do. And if there's any deviations, we can detect them early, correct it to ensure that the project stays on track. So this is an iterative process that happens over and over again. So we plan something, then we execute it, and then we need to monitor and control it to make sure that we actually executed what we planned to do. And if there's deviations, then we correct it, and then we move on. So at the end, we will have our project deliverable, and then we move on to the closing phases to close out the project. Now, the project doesn't end when the deliverable is finished. You still have to go through the closing processes, which include, formally giving notice to your teammates to let them know that the project is over, documenting your lessons learned, closing out the project, etc., etc. A quick way to help you memorize the 5 process groups is using this rhyme. So the 5 process groups is initiating, planning, executing, monitoring, controlling, and closing. So the first letters of these 5 process groups matches with the phrase, "In physical education, Mary cries constantly." It's much easier to remember this phrase, and you can use this quick phrase to help you memorize the 5 process groups. Now let's move on to our knowledge areas. Project integration management includes the processes and activities to identify, define, combine, unify, and coordinate the various processes and project management activities within the project management process groups. Next, we have project scope management, which includes the processes required to ensure that the project includes all of the work and only the work required to complete the project successfully. Project schedule management includes the processes required to manage the timely completion of the project. Project cost management includes the processes involved in planning, estimating, budgeting, financing, funding, managing, and controlling cost so that the project can be completed within the approved budgets. Quality management includes the processes for incorporating the organization's quality policies regarding planning, managing, and controlling project and product quality requirements in order to meet the stakeholders' expectations. Next, we have project resource management. Project resource management includes the processes to identify, acquire, and manage the resources needed for the successful completion of the project. The next knowledge area that we have is project communications management, which includes the processes required to ensure timely and appropriate planning, collection, creation, distribution, storage, retrieval, management, control, monitoring, and ultimate disposal of project information. Project risk management includes all of the processes of conducting risk management planning, identification, analysis, response planning, and response implementation, and risk monitoring on the project. Project procurement includes all of the processes necessary to purchase or acquire products, services, or results needed from outside the project team in order to complete the projects. Our last knowledge area is project stakeholder management. Project stakeholder management includes the processes required to identify the people, groups, or organizations that could impact or be impacted by the project, to analyze the stakeholders' expectations and their impact on the project, and to develop the appropriate management strategies for effectively engaging the stakeholders in project decisions and execution. Now, I know that the project knowledge areas could be quite tedious to memorize if you don't use some sort of strategy to help you memorize it. So here is a quick phrase that matches with the first letters, the same first letters as the 10 knowledge areas. Again, just summarizing the 10 knowledge areas again, they are integration, scope, schedule, cost, quality, resources, communications, risk, procurement, and stakeholders. And this is based on the PMBOK 6th edition. A quick phrase that's going to help you memorize this is, "I saw 6 cars quickly rip Carol's rear passenger side. The first letters that begins with this phrase matches with the same letters that begins with the 10 knowledge areas. So by memorizing this phrase, it's going to help you memorize the 10 knowledge areas faster. So if you want more tips just like this, or if you want to learn how to get your PMP or your CAPM certification in the next 6 weeks, then be sure to
Right. So, I just gave you that overview there of the extra part of, the project management process groups and how it's linked with the um, the knowledge areas, right? Let's just make sure. Right, moving from one to the next. So, what does this have to do with the project scheduling, right? And really, this document flowchart here, it tells you the process that you go through within project management in through any project that you would do. The initiating and planning phase here that we have. So really, we spoke about the beginning of your project when you have the project charter. And your project charter would have all the information, the start and end dates, the budget, who's working on it, things like that. And with your charter, you will have to identify the stakeholders. Stakeholders, remember, anyone who would be affected by your project, right? And you try to satisfy the requirements of the stakeholders. That's why it has to collect the requirements. Obviously, as I said, in a previous class, not all the time you'd be able to satisfy the requirements of all stakeholders. However, you would be able to satisfy the requirements of your main stakeholder, which is usually it's the sponsor, the project sponsor. Now that you are able to understand and satisfy all the requirements of the project, right? You are now able to define your scope. Remember, the scope is the work that you have to do. If you are able to define your scope, then you are able to create that work breakdown structure, right? Remember, the work breakdown structure is a breakdown of the work, simplest terms, a breakdown of the work that you would have to do. If you're able to create that, then you are able to create the activity list, the budget, and your schedule. Because remember, your work now would have been broken down into smaller, manageable parts, right? An activity list. So you are able now to say, activity one would cost so much, this would be the duration of activity one, and these would be the persons who would be working on activity one, or who would be in charge on that activity. You are now able to communicate this, right? So you need to ensure that you have a communication plan, right? Understand how communication would be done throughout the project. And you also need to ensure that when you've done this, you would have had a risk assessment done on each of the major phases within your project, right? Notice I'm not saying that you're doing a risk assessment, right, on your entire project, but you need to do that risk assessment on individual activities and tasks, right? When you would have done that in the initiation, the blue box that we have here, right? You are now able to go on to the execution and the monitoring aspect, right? You go on and the project is project started, and they're going through all the plans, and they're executing the plan. So you would have, if you have no changes in a project, which is highly unlikely, you would just have your normal toolbox meetings, your reporting, your monthly meetings, status reports, things like that. And then you would have the closeout of your project. But we know that projects, you always have changes in the projects, whatever it might be, from from the major stakeholders to your team itself. What is the process that your company presently use, right? Do they have a change request? Do they have a log? So something very simple that I initiated, when you have changes occurring with a project, you just do something which is known as a change request. So you send in This is the activity. This is the change that you want to do. This is the risks associated with it, right? And there's a column, there's a whole table for it. And then you also have the reasons behind it. And it is logged. Now, that change request, and when it is logged, meaning that it is recorded as there being a request for a change, it doesn't go back to the charter, the stakeholders, the requirement. It goes to the scope, because remember, this change would be affecting the work that you have to do. If there's a change in the work, then there's a change in the scope. There's a change in the scope, it's going to affect the work breakdown structure. If it changes the work breakdown structure, then your activity list, your budget, your schedule is going to change. You need to communicate this change to all of the stakeholders, and then you need to do a risk assessment of the change that is being requested, right? So on the template that I developed for this company, each person, as it went through each section, each manager had to sign off on, the risk assessment if it was done, the communicated to it, the change in the budget, change in the schedule, things like that. And then you go along, and this is how change in one company is done, right? Other companies would have different change request models. So a definition here, which I always identify that, usually might come in an exam. Hint, hint. A schedule is a listing of a project's milestones, activities, and deliverables, usually with intended start and finish dates. It's the process of deciding how to distribute resources between the required work and setting start and due dates of the project work items and project tasks. This process is usually performed by the project manager in the context of initially creating the work plan and then fine-tuned by the project team later at stages of the project execution, right? The steps in it, you are usually able, many projects, they have different steps, but understanding, right, the steps is important, but is something that just really you go through. However, what is important is understanding the inputs of your schedule, right? And when we say understanding the inputs of your schedule, we're really talking about things that would affect the scheduling of your project. So we're talking about the personal and project calendars and understanding the working days. The shifts, resource availability is critical to completing a project schedule. And when we talk about working days, let's say you would have scheduled a project at the beginning of this year that would have started at the end of April, let's say, or the beginning of April, right? And you didn't schedule a holiday, you scheduled work for the 2nd of May, right? And this is just because this week the announcement came out that on the 2nd of May, we would be celebrating Eid. It's an unforeseen, not unforeseen, but it's usually the dates for the religious celebrations. Some of them are not really fixed because it depends on sometimes, I think, the moon and different things. So you might have scheduled work for the 2nd of May, which is now a holiday. What would you do? You have to ensure now that you adjust your schedule. If it is that you are working with an unlimited budget, well then sure, work on the 2nd of May and tell your workers to come out on the 2nd of May. However, we know that not often we don't work with these infinite budgets. So you have enough time now to make adjustments to your schedule to ensure that the workers, they know that on the 2nd of May that they don't have to come out to work. Your stakeholders know that you will not be working on the 2nd of May. Any suppliers that you have, that they are, no deliveries would be done on that day, right? even the security for your compound. They know that nobody would be on the compound on that day, right? And this is important, right? Because if it is that you decide that you are going to work on the 2nd of May, it's a holiday, then it affects your budget if it wasn't catered for already, because it's a holiday. And when you have to work on a holiday, that's in some companies, it's, either double time or triple time that you're working for, right? When we say also understanding the working days in Trinidad, some working days, some months, and I'm sure next year is going to be like that. I don't even know when is Carnival next year, but next year, February, if Carnival is in February, I'm sure it might have 15 working days alone, right? Because you're hearing the carnival of all carnivals that is going to be held next year, right? And not only because it's carnival, 2468, that's 8 days you have to take away from the weekends, plus the 2 days for carnival, right? So that's 10, right? So you're thinking to yourself, well, 10 days, maybe that would bring us down to like 20, 10, 20 days, or even if it's February, 18 days, right? So where more days? If it's the Carnival of Carnivals, Carnival Friday, nobody gonna come to work. And Ash Wednesday, persons might take your entire week off, right? I actually got a request, and you all might laugh at this. I got a request last week for next year, right? If I could remember the dates I know of, whereby I saw a person is applying for um the Thursday to the following Thursday. And I had a feeling that it is that's the carnival weekend, the carnival week. So they're applying for the Thursday before carnival and for the Thursday after that whole week, right? Um, persons are sending in their requests. Persons are looking for their if they're not staying in Trinidad, they're looking for, what is it they could do out of Trinidad. So these are things as a project manager you would need to take in consideration, especially also when we talk about resource availability. If you have, your main team members taking vacation during your project or not being here over a period, let's say, Trinidadians, if a holiday lands on a Thursday, they take the Friday off. If a holiday is on a Tuesday, they take the Monday long weekends. We like that long weekend thing. So as a project manager, you need to take stock of and understand how the resource availability will be affecting your project. Also, if persons get sick during your project, or if someone applies for vacation during a project, right? Sometimes you are as a project manager, you are not made aware of these things because it usually has to go through HR. And because persons might not have been directly reporting to you before, they would have made the application through their direct line supervisor before. So, all these things, resource availability. Also, we're talking about resource availability is the delays. How many persons I've spoken to right now who are their projects are delayed because they are waiting on um the resources to come into the country. Especially, I think it was earlier this year when they had that huge backlog um, in one of the ports in the States, one of the major ports, and there was like backlogs of containers that were just there for weeks, and they didn't know when they would have been able to clear it out. Or even last year when the Evergrande, it stuck in the Suez Canal, right? And there was this huge backlog of containers and shipments, and you know, also the main port in Florida when you have hurricane season going on and you're waiting for resources to come in, you know, all these things are will affect your schedule. So this is why it's important, right, that you understand these things when creating your schedule. And we would go into these two a bit later on, talking about the schedule network analysis and the critical path analysis, right? Talking about schedule compression. And the thing is that I'm sure you all would have seen these things. These two tools that we have here, you all use it, I'm sure, already in your workplace, right? It's that you maybe never call it what it really is, right? Your project is going behind schedule. And you need to bring back, you know, you're trying to bring back your project on schedule. What can you do? And you know, you might have seen a project manager did something and you just think, oh, they look like they just, you know, arbitrarily did this. But there are two things that project managers usually do that are very common. The first is called crashing. And crashing is really when you assign more resources, like it says, to an activity. So you take resources, let's say different activities. So you have your entire, during the execution process group, you have your entire, all the different persons working and they're working on the different activities. And you realize, you know, an activity might be finishing early. And although you scheduled it for 10 days, it's actually taking 6 days. And you're on the 5th day, you realize, okay, this is gonna finish tomorrow. But you scheduled it for 10 days. What would the workers be doing for the next 4 days? But you realize another activity was behind schedule when it's supposed to finish on day 3, but you reach day 7 and it still hasn't finished as yet. So as a project manager, you would talk to the person, the supervisor, and you would say, you know what, I need these guys to go and work on this activity here. So you assign more resources to the activity that is running behind schedule, right? However, the assumption is that the time you will save will offset the added resource costs. Because let's say if it is you don't have persons to add, you would have to now bring in new persons onto the project. Another one that's another method that project managers use is called fast tracking. And fast tracking really involves the rearranging of activities to allow more parallel work. Meaning here, when we did the schedule and when we going to do the network diagram shortly, you would see that in it, what we really like is that activities would occur one after the next, right? When activity A is finished, B would be completed, then C, D, and we go like that. However, sometimes if you're running behind the schedule, then you would try to, what we said here, fast track the activities. So everything that is supposed to be going on, instead of waiting for one activity to finish in order for another one to start, you then just start all the activities, right? However, the thing with, of course, a disadvantage with this is that it would increase the risk that you might miss things because remember, everything is going on and you are the project manager and you have to ensure that you understand and know everything that's going on because all the activities would be starting at the same time and going on at the same time, right? These different things here about the project scheduling are just things, definitions, and that you could read up on, right? About estimation, effort, resources, duration, right? The work that you have, calendar times that we spoke about. We spoke about this as well, right? Precedence, concurrence, lead and lag. We talk about lead and lag, but precedence, a task that must occur before another is said to have precedence over the other one, right? The preceding task, right? So in order for task in order for task B to start, E must be completed, right? Concurrent tasks means that task A and task B can start together, right? And we did speak about milestones having a duration of 0. It's a particular point within your project, right? When you would have achieved a specific goal or, an activity or some sort of milestone within the project and deliverables. All right. The slack and float, like it says, they're both synonymous, meaning they mean the same, right? The slack is the amount of time you have before it delays a task. And we'll be going through that in a bit, right? So I'm pausing that now. Let me stop this share. Should I come on this? Stop share. Right. So any questions so far? None? Okay. All right. Okay, good. Because now we're going to look at two short videos about the work breakdown structure, right? And what the work breakdown structure entails. Again, I usually do this instead of listening to me for the longest while. So no questions. Let me share back my screen. There we go. And restart the recording.
Who has created many work breakdown structures for different industries, I can tell you the solid benefit of having a really good WBS for project success. So I'm going to teach you today what it is, why you need one, and an example too. So if you're excited about this, like this video, and let's get to it. So what is a WBS? No, it is not work bull bleep. Okay, it's not that. It actually is an acronym for work breakdown structure. And it's like an organizational hierarchical chart if I were to do a comparison. What you really want to do is you want to take a deliverable and you want to break it down into manageable chunks. And that's what the WBS does for you. It's an awesome technique whenever you need to take something very complex and simplify it so that you can actually deliver to it. Work breakdown structure layout. Think of it like an org chart, and I have an example for you, so let me show you. So this is a really good visual of what I was just talking about regarding how a WBS is laid out, like an org chart. So like an org chart, your top level would be your CEO or your president, as we have here, but for the WBS, it's actually the project goal. It could be a deliverable, a department. You can break it up whatever you want, but it's really ultimately, if you were to complete everything, what is it that you're delivering? And that's what would be in that particular area. Now, you would break it down just like an org chart. You have your president, and then you have your VPs or your directors, and it's the same thing here. Your level 2 would be major activities. So whatever that deliverable may be or department activity, you would break out the major activities. I like to call them the really large buckets. And then you go down to level 3. So these are either milestone activities within that major one. They could be even a further breakdown of activities. And last but not least, you have your level 4. Those individuals, if you really were to compare it to an org chart, it would be those who were the doers. It's the tasks, it's the orientation. So that's what your level 4 would be. So when you have a project, really break it down in this manner. It's a super easy way to get a handle on the amount of work you have to do and to truly understand if you have your scope correct, your timing correct, etc. So really break things down with your layout in a WBS with level 1, 2, 3, and 4. Work breakdown structure example. So I have an example here for you on a construction project. Okay, so now let's actually take a look at an example, because when you see it, as you can see what I have in front of you right now, it really makes a lot of sense. So that level 1, what is our deliverable? It's building a house. Now you can only imagine how complex this can be. So what are our level 2s? Well, with this particular way it was broken up, it was in design, structural, utilities, finishing. And now this is where the level 3, there's even more you could break down within that level 2. And so if you take a look, for example, with design, decide on your plans, make changes. Let's take a look at some utilities. So you have your plumbing and your electrical and your HVAC. Now, one more level that is not shown here is your level 4s. So underneath plumbing, you're going to have tons of tasks just to get all the plumbing. One would be take a look at your plan and get a list of all your plumbing materials, go to the store or put in the order for your plumbing materials, pick up the order from the plumbing materials, schedule in your plumbers in order to put in the material. Do you see what I mean? There's a lot that you can do here, but it just shows you how you can break things down, as I like to say, in manageable chunks. Other cool things about a work breakdown structure. All right, the first thing is you can take this structure that you just created and translate it into an action plan. It is an amazing tool and technique to do this and actually pull out all your action items. So something that I highly recommend that you do. Another cool thing about WBS is it actually can bring accountability to your team members, because this is something that you should be doing with them. And last but not least, use it as an activity, creating and finalizing your WBS, particularly if you create it into a project plan, at your kickoff meeting. So cool, this tool. It is so important to project management because you use it throughout the life cycle of a project.
WBS. A project charter has been approved, and you are assigned as a project manager. You have been discussing with your key stakeholder, collecting all requirement related to the project. You have defined the scope in detail along with your sponsor. Now, you have to create WBS along with your core team. WBS stand for Work Breakdown Structure, is the foundation of every project, because it defines in detail all the work necessary to accomplish a project's objectives. At the level 1 of a WBS, it describes the project name, and is reflected the objective of the project. A project objectives can be decomposed into several major deliverables at the level 2. To get a major deliverable done, we need to accomplish all the deliverables within. The deliverables are written at the level 3. A deliverable, as an element of WBS, can be decomposed further, up to several child level. The lowest level of elements, in WBS hierarchical structure, are called work packages. For the software development project, mostly, the WBS stop at level 4. However, for a large construction project, the WBS can be developed up to 12 level. There are many approaches in developing WBS: component, phasing, functional use, geographical area, and many others. Component approach is considered as the best approach for physical output project, such as airplane, construction, and other. Basically, this approach based on the product breakdown structure. We see here a WBS in building a bicycle. A bicycle consists of several major parts: wheels, frame, gears, and accessory. We focus on one major part: wheels. Wheels consists of several subparts: rim, hub, spokes, and tires. That is components approach. Phasing approach is appropriate for a very large construction project, or can be used as well as for some of software development project. Functional use approach is suitable for constructing a process manufacturing, like petrochemical plant or cement plant. Geographical area approach is good for a project in a large area coverage. Of course, beside those approaches, there are many other approaches including combination of them in developing WBS. Let's create WBS by having brainstorming session. and using sticky notes. All you need are flip chart paper, sticky notes, and marker. Put the flip chart paper on the wall. Do brainstorming with your core team. Each of you write any deliverable or work package on a sticky note, have a look, and rearrange the structure. Let's have an exercise in developing WBS for a small project. One day, you are asked by your relative to help her in managing a wedding party. Each of your core team member, write any deliverable needed in a wedding party on each sticky note. First, we put the project objective, wedding party. In a wedding party you need to have a program. Do not forget about the invitation. We will provide the invitee with souvenir. Then the receptionist will be one of the deliverable. In Indonesia it called pagarayu. We need to do the photos and videos. Oh yeah, as the major deliverable will put reception. Of course food would be one of the deliverable. Beverages as well. Don't forget to mention the venue, including chairs and tables. Decoration as well. How about drinks, documentation, and party place? Put aside all the notes. Leave only the project objective at the upper center of the paper. Now, we start to figure out the major deliverables. Oops, we have two notes that have similar meaning, venue and party place. Why don't we use venue instead of party place? We continue looking for other major deliverables. I guessed, we already have all the major deliverable in our WBS. We need to figure out the constituents of each major deliverable. Oh, beverages and drink are the same things. We need to rearrange this and add a new major deliverable, catering. Some of the major deliverable have not decomposed yet. We need to find out their constituents. Invitation. We need to have a guest list first, then we have to print the invitation. The last deliverable would be the distribution. The program is decomposed into two deliverables, traditional ceremony and master ceremony. For the documentation we add another deliverable, album creation. At this point, we need to add the lines to show the structure of this WBS. Now, we have a complete WBS. Wait a minute. We miss one important major deliverable, project management. Project management elements have to exist in every WBS. It represents the work to be done in managing all the process of other elements in the project's WBS. A WBS is a necessary project management tool because it provides a basic foundation for other activities, like estimating cost, developing schedules, identifying resources, determining where risks may occur, and providing the means for measuring project status using earned value management. A good WBS represents 100% of the deliverable to be done in achieving project objectives. It means there is no other work to be done outside the WBS to achieve project objectives. When we are creating WBS, we are answering what questions, or sometimes how questions. We are not answering why questions, or who questions, or how much questions, or whom questions, or when questions, or resources, or materials. There are common practices in drawing lines in WBS. If you have enough room, then you can do like you create an organization chart. If you don't have enough room, then you do this. It is like a subfolder in main computer user interface. In any case, you cannot draw the line like this, because it means that guest list is the child component of invitation. The invitation production is the child component of guest list, and then the distribution is the child component of the invitation production. In other words, component invitation is the great-grandfather of component distribution. We see here some sample of WBS from many different type of projects. All of these WBS are taken from real projects. The first one is building a cement plan. It is a large construction project. This WBS based on functional use approach combining with some other approach. The second one is outlet expansion. It was taken from one of Indonesian bank some years ago. This bank wanted to expand its outlet all over in Indonesia. It was a multi-year project. The third one is a software development and implementation project. The organization did not develop on their own. They hired a consultant to develop the program as well as to do the change management process. The last one is about construction project. We can see a typical construction project. Some more tips in creating WBS. First, even though you are a good planner, don't do the WBS creation alone. You need to involve your core team in this process. There are many advantages by having your core team in creating WBS. Some of the advantages would be having various perspective of the project scope, as well as building a robust project team at the same time. Second, don't jump to scheduling software immediately in creating WBS. It could limit the creativity thinking and lead the team to overlook some of the necessary deliverables. Using sticky notes is much better. It stimulates collaboration process and gives the opportunity to have a helicopter view at the same time.
Right. So let me just stop. What's this? Stop sharing. Right, so that's the WBS. There is. Right, and all the notes for it are in your in the handouts, right? So any questions and things so far? All right, if not, then that's it for today, right? Yeah, and that's it. If any questions, just shoot me a WhatsApp or something, right? All right, have a good day.